Nature connects us all here in the Northwest, and living here carries a certain responsibility.
We as humans, I feel, have been put here to manage the land.
It's not always easy.
This is where they're killing the most. We have our cattle currently just down in that field.
But the hope is we can find a balance.
We're taking away from their habitat, and the best thing you can do is give it back to them.
In this Environment Northwest special, we're tracking our human impact on nature in the Northwest.
Typically, animals will cross along the road and often will get hit by vehicles.
You know, they made the decision back then that they had to make, but it was an everlasting, impact on the environment and the people.
And the choices that are shaping our future.
It trickles down to pretty much every person within the Northwest.
This is Environment Northwest, connected with nature. Hello, and thank you for joining us for this Environment Northwest special. I'm KREM 2 Chief Meteorologist Jeremy Legoo, and over the next hour, we'll look at our connection to nature here in the Northwest and how it impacts us and how we impact it. We begin with an investigation into growing numbers of wild predators in Washington. KREM 2's Whitney Ward digs into the effect wolves, cougars, and bears are having on the people who live here.
I did not bring any apples. We didn't.
Kathy McKay is the lifelong owner of K Diamond K Guest Ranch in Republic. Built by her parents, she has spent her life continuing the family legacy and passing it on to others.
We feed 2 tons of hay a day.
But as she showed me around her 1,700-acre property, she says the growing wolf population right in her own backyard makes her wonder about the future.
We're the ones going extinct.
Kathy tells me she has known wolf packs on all sides.
This is where they're killing the most. We have our cattle currently just down in that field.
How many packs are up here? Do you know?
I know of about 5 packs that are within 25 miles of us.
That hasn't always been the case. She says it's only been in the last 5 to 7 years that the wolves have truly emerged as her #1 threat.
Kathy tells me she's lost more than 100 animals here at the ranch over the last decade. At first, it was maybe 1 or 2 each year, but this year alone, it's already been 20. She says the problem clearly is not getting better, it's getting worse.
But wolves are not the only predator out there. This map from Washington's Department of Fish and Wildlife shows reported sightings of the state's wolves, cougars, and even grizzly bears. Cougar sightings are the most frequent statewide. It's estimated there are about 2,500 adult cougars in the state, and there are thousands of reports every year and occasionally attacks on people, like this one near Snoqualmie Pass earlier this year, or this one in Stevens County in 2022 that seriously injured a little girl.
How scary it must have been for them.
WDFW data shows 247 depredation incidents involving cougars, killing or injuring mostly smaller animals like goats and sheep. 1 in 3 attacks happening in these 4 counties. Grizzlies are reported far less often, but they are in Washington. This same map shows a handful of sightings just this year. And while they are a protected species in Washington, they are managed at the federal level by U.S. Fish and Wildlife, and their numbers in Washington are minimal, only a few dozen that roam between the U.S.-Canada border in the Selkirk Mountains and a handful in the North Cascades. But the plan to bring grizzlies back also worries a lot of people here in eastern Washington, saying they will only add to the wolf problem. This grizzly was spotted on camera numerous times in Stevens County, killing one family's chickens.
Grizzly bears, they just don't stop. Once they find something that they want, you don't just chase them off.
But wolves are what's spotted most regularly in Ferry, Stevens, and Pend Oreille counties, and I have covered their continued conflict with ranchers here for almost 10 years. More than half of the state's 42 documented packs are in this small remote corner of the state, at least 260 total wolves and 36 known attacks on cattle. But law enforcement here says those official numbers are just a fraction of reality.
Some of the ranchers here aren't reporting anymore because contacting the Department of Fish and Wildlife, they have given up on us coming up with solutions.
Ray Maycumber has been the sheriff of Ferry County for the last decade. He is now one of 16 Eastern Washington sheriffs who have formed a coalition providing testimony to the Fish and Wildlife Commission about serious concerns for public safety.
You've got bus stops out in the rural areas that overlap with known wolf territory. They're being seen all over the place, even in backyards.
He says ranchers and property owners like Kathy have lost faith in the state's ability or willingness to manage Washington's wolves in a way that works for everyone.
We keep following a plan that isn't working.
What would your message be to incoming state leaders?
Be sure to listen to everyone.
I took those concerns to the Department of Fish and Wildlife to ask what would it take to change how Washington manages its wolves.
What does it tell you as a department that so many people don't want to report, that so many people don't feel that it makes a difference?
It is a little discouraging because we also rely on that data to know what's going on out there. Our numbers differ a lot then from what we're hearing.
What about the idea of relocating some of them out of that northeast corner into kind of the southwest where they're not yet, fully established, just to balance things out and kind of ease the burden?
The research on translocation shows that generally animals don't survive or they just return where they came from. So what we could do, revisit the gray wolf conservation and management plan. We could open that up and rediscuss it. But again, that's something that would have to come at the direction of either the Fish and Wildlife Commission or a request from the Wolf Advisory Group.
She says so far that hasn't happened, so until then, both sides will have to make some sacrifice. Back here at K Diamond K, Kathy says the sacrifice has been one-sided.
There's people 300 miles away making decisions for our livelihood. I feel like we're preaching on deaf ears.
She worries even if there is a change, it may be too little and too late.
We as humans, I feel, have been put here to manage the land. Our whole life, we helped animals, and they can't speak, they can't talk, so they are all relying on me to protect them.
This past year brought news that another predator, grizzly bears, are coming back to the North Cascades. That region is an area where they used to live before humans killed them off, so it's been targeted as a place to continue the federal rehabilitation. The plan calls for bringing 3 to 7 grizzlies each year from the Rocky Mountains or British Columbia to the North Cascades. This will continue over the next 5 to 10 years. While scientists want to bring them back to their natural habitat, locals and farmers are worried about the potential impact.
If a kid goes out there, he's in jeopardy. If that predator comes around the farm animals are in jeopardy.
The goal is to rebuild a population of 200 bears over the next century. Still ahead on this Environment Northwest special, after decades of sitting unused, a bridge to nowhere might finally have a purpose.
Takes 1 or 2 brave cow elk and the rest will go.
Plus, the everlasting impact of mining in eastern Washington.
It's hard to fathom, to think a mineral is worth someone's life. But when you're in an industry that destroys our mother, nature, that's the cost.
For decades, it was a literal bridge to nowhere in North Idaho, an overpass on I-90 in the Silver Valley that was never open to drivers and unused for more than 50 years. I traveled to Osborne to see how the bridge will be used to welcome a new kind of traffic. The Silver Valley is home to an abundant, wide array of wildlife. It also has one of the busiest freeways in the entire region running right through it. And those two things don't always get along.
We have big game, so deer, elk, moose, bears, mountain lions. Laura Wolf, I'm a regional wildlife biologist with Idaho Department of Fish and Game. Typically, animals will cross along the road and often will get hit by vehicles.
Wildlife crossings simply get animals from one side of the road to the other without crossing through traffic.
In the 2-mile stretch on either side of this overpass, there were about 75 animals hit in the last 10 years.
The stretch of road from the east side of Coeur d'Alene to the Montana border has the second highest density of roadkill anywhere along Interstate 90 stretching from Seattle to Boston.
And luckily, in the last 20 years, I've spent a lot of time doing animal and aquatic conveyance. I'm Kirsten Voorhees. I am a civil engineer by degree. For my career, I do animal corridors mostly. I do bridge systems.
Osborne, Idaho is Kirsten's backyard. But this old abandoned bridge, one day becoming a wildlife crossing, wasn't her idea.
A local guy, one of the nicest guys you'd ever meet, who really had a dream and a vision, and he bugged people for a good decade.
Carl Wilson was an avid outdoorsman and a member of the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation who worked hard to make this happen. To him, it seemed simple. Put this bridge that sat unused for more than 5 decades to good use.
So the main thing is to put up funnel fencing. So that's typically 8-foot fence that as they come towards the roadway, the fence just funnels them towards the either overpass or underpass, depending on what the structure is.
That makes this crossing much cheaper than others in the region. For reference, the crossing over I-90 on Snoqualmie Pass cost about $6.2 million.
And so it's whatever it costs to purchase and implement fencing. That's basically the cost of this structure. And that right now is probably somewhere around $400,000 to $500,000.
Money that comes from a grant through the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation. The smallest one awarded because no major infrastructure changes are needed. Even the pavement on the bridge stays.
It just takes 1 or 2 brave cow elk and the rest will go.
A relatively easy solution to a dangerous problem, all thanks to one man's persistence.
He said, I need you to promise me that you're going to finish this thing if I don't make it.
Carl passed about a year ago, but his dream lives on. A dream that may lead to future crossings for the Silver Valley, helping to make the interstate a little safer for everyone.
So we carry it through, and we'll continue to carry it through no matter what it takes.
You can keep updated with all our Environment Northwest coverage with KREM 2+. It's our streaming channel that you watch on your TV. We have recent stories in our Environment Northwest specials available for you to watch on demand. If you don't yet have KREM 2+, it's free and available to download on Roku, Fire TV, and Apple TV. It has been decades since mining ended, but environmental impacts are still being felt at the Midnight Mine.
You know, they made the decision back then that they had to make, but it was an everlasting, impact on the environment and the people.
Up next, our Environment Northwest team investigates the lasting impact of uranium mining on the Spokane tribe. Welcome back to our Environment Northwest special, Connected with Nature. I'm Jeremy Legoo. It's been decades since miners last pulled uranium from the Midnight Mine in Stevens County, but the environmental impacts are still felt to this day. The mine is located along the Spokane River on the Spokane Reservation near Wellpinit. Aidan Brown with our Environment Northwest team investigates the lasting impact of the mine on the Spokane tribe and the land they call home.
Since time immemorial, the Spokane tribe has called this region home. But just 70 years ago, a major discovery left the face of this landscape changed forever.
The mine was here before I was born. We grew up with it. You just didn't really pay attention. It was here. It was just part of the landscape, essentially.
In 1954, twin brothers Jim and John LeBret struck atomic age gold, uranium. The brothers then went forward and started Midnight Mine. Over the next 10 years, the mine would go on to produce 5.3 million pounds of proto-ore and leave a slew of environmental issues for the Spokane people in its wake.
It's hard to fathom, to think a mineral is worth someone's life. But when you're in an industry that destroys our mother, nature, that's the cost.
The mine consisted of 4 open pits, but by 1979, Dawn Mining Company faced issues with water runoff and accumulation of a radioactive slurry in these pits. A pond was constructed to hold this toxic water, but it wasn't enough.
The Spokane tribe, like other tribes in the United States, understand water is life. Not just a saying, but true, to understand that and to feel it spiritually as a culture in your tradition and your understanding of what all of this is about, that's the bottom line.
In a 2010 assessment, the Federal Agency for Toxic Substances and Disease Registry classified activities using waters from the nearby Blue Creek drainage as a public health hazard.
So that's why the Spokane Tribe of Indians challenged ourselves, because we have to meet it, to have the highest water quality standards in the nation.
But Blue Creek has been a popular swimming, fishing, and recreational spot for many in the Spokane tribe. including Ricky Sherwood.
Just on the other side of this hill over there, there's the Blue Creek campground. We grew up swimming and it was kind of our spot. Every summer, this was just kind of where we would go.
Now, all along Blue Creek, signs warn visitors of the invisible danger.
To be safe, we posted those signs.
Linda Meyer is the remedial project manager for the Midnight Mine Superfund site and has overseen this cleanup effort throughout its progress.
Once we do the cleanup and investigate the sediments and feel comfortable we've removed, that the sediments meet the cleanup standard, we should be able to take those signs down.
But cleanup efforts over the years have already made a huge impact on the area.
Pit 3, here's what it looked like early this season. Later, mid-season, we've dewatered that pit and removed the contaminated sediments from the bottom and are now placing a geomembrane and then starting to install the well that water will be collected and pumped out of this.
Warren Saylor has been speaking on this issue since 1990. But before he was working on the cleanup effort,
I was a prober. I was deep in the pit, the bottom of the pit. That stuff was so black. I'd stick the probe on those rocks and that meter would just sink out of sight.
Almost all of the original miners were members of the Spokane tribe, and the Midnight Mine provided one of the only industry jobs on the reservation.
The thing about the mine, people kind of fail to understand when they say, why would you go there? You have to feed your family. I got kids, only job on the reservation, only job for 50 miles, 60 miles around, because nobody was going to hire an Indian in those days to work at that mine to feed my family. I'd went.
That decision was one that many on the reservation faced.
My dad did a lot of work up at the mine. As a young guy, he was in his 20s. I was just a little guy. I think when it closed, I was like 8 years old. They made the decision back then that they had to make, but it was an everlasting, impact on the environment and the people.
43 years have passed since the mine shut down, and now the question remains.
Do you think people will be able to, take from the land again, like they used to without any worry that, this could be harmful to me?
I think that's something that we're striving for. I think we'll know in time.
As for the cleanup's completion,
well, I believe it'll be completed within 5 years, but I'm not in a rush. I want it done right. I don't care if it takes another 8 or 10 years. It has to be done right. We're hoping that at some day, it might be 50 or 100 years from now, there'll be no scarring. We'll have put Mother back the way they first found her before that first shovel went in the ground. Because you always learn from the past.
Aiden Brown.
To make a better future.
KREM 2 News.
It's all connected.
Up next, how our growing population is affecting and even killing Northwest deer.
We're taking away from their habitat.
A cougar sighting had Spokane's South Hill neighborhood buzzing last summer. In the video, you can see the large cougar easily jump a fence into a yard near Manitou Park. While cougar sightings are not rare in eastern Washington, wildlife officials did say it was unusual to see one that low on the South Hill. Experts say the cougar was likely following deer. The Northwest is home to hundreds of thousands of deer, but as we grow, the landscape they call home is changing. Nicole Hernandez shows us how that change is impacting the deer population.
The aptly named Peaceful Valley is home to the river, a bunch of people, and wildlife. Spotting these deer always seems to seal the deal on the peaceful of the valley, until it's not so peaceful. Deer are having to adapt as humans destroy their peace.
It's all connected.
Samantha Bundick, hoofed mammal expert, says it's not just here by the river, but across the entire inland Northwest.
They just figured out how to coexist.
Coexisting is far from thriving, though.
You are seeing a declining population of deer.
Some human-caused.
It got hit by a car.
And some more natural, like from chronic wasting disease.
It's pretty bad. It's a disease you don't want to have in your state.
That's where Hunter Westacott comes in.
The samples we take are retropharyngeal lymph nodes.
Both North Idaho and Washington test deer for chronic wasting disease.
It can have pretty detrimental effects on your population sizes if it gets a strong enough hold.
While the disease is natural, humans are contributing to its spread. One example with feeding piles.
Artificial areas where deer can congregate and spread disease that way.
Also our infrastructure, particularly roads.
There are roads that are real barriers and they cannot cross, and that fragments habitat.
Our roads are segregating deer populations. That's bad for a couple of reasons. One, the less room deer have to spread out, the easier disease can spread. Two, genetic variation.
Having a lot of genetic variation in a population is very important for long-term success.
Without the ability to disperse and migrate, that genetic variation is harder to accomplish.
There is research showing that subspecies are being created because the genetics aren't being mixed anymore.
And then there's the obvious problem with roads.
Human collisions are one of the biggest mortality factors for ungulates.
Of all these problems, there's one thing in common. Us.
My advice is always to just let them be and enjoy watching them.
And when you can, plant native plants in your yard.
We're taking away from their habitat, and the best thing you can do is give it back to them.
An attempt to restore some of the peace the population had before us. In Spokane, Nicole Hernandez, KREM 2 News.
Thank you for joining us for this Environment Northwest special, as we explored our connection to nature here in the Northwest. For more Environment Northwest stories and specials, check out what we have to offer over on KREM 2 Plus. It's home to all our series, including an in-depth look at earthquakes, snowpack, fires, endangered species, orcas, and more. It's all free to watch. Just download KREM 2 Plus for Roku, Fire TV, or Apple TV. I'm KREM 2 Chief Meteorologist Jeremy Legue. We'll be bringing you more Environment Northwest stories throughout the year on KREM 2 News. Thanks for watching.